He's not normal, is he? The man sneered, loud enough for Danny to hear. Maria's blood iced over. 20 years she'd been slinging coffee, deflecting insults aimed at the lonely, the lost, the just plain different. This wasn't just some customer. This was a kid, twisting sugar packets into impossible shapes, just trying to cope. Billionaire Mitchell Harrison, the boy's father, was outside on a call, clueless. He had no idea the storm brewing. Maria did. This wasn't about pancakes anymore. It was about survival, about dignity. And though those loudmouths didn't know it, Maria was about to remind them that even the quietest souls had teeth. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. The morning rush at Maple Grove Diner was in full swing, but Maria Santos moved through it all with the grace of someone who'd been serving coffee and comfort for nearly 2 decades. At 42, she had weathered life storms with quiet dignity, her gentle smile masking the weight of raising her teenage daughter alone after her husband's accident 3 years ago. The diner's worn vinyl booze and checkered floor tiles had become her second home, a place where she knew every regular's order by heart, and where her kindness touched everyone who walked through those glass doors. But this Tuesday morning felt different somehow, as Maria wiped down table 6 for the 3rd time, adjusting the small ceramic vase that held a single daisy. Her personal touch that made each table special, she noticed a commotion near the corner booth. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit sat rigidly across from a young boy who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The child was rocking gently back and forth, his hands covering his ears as the breakfast crowd's chatter seemed to overwhelm his senses. Maria's maternal instincts kicked in immediately, recognizing something familiar in the boy's distress. The man's phone buzzed constantly against the table, but his attention remained fixed on the child with a mixture of concern and helplessness that tugged at Maria's heart. She couldn't help but wonder what brought this unlikely pair to her quiet corner of the world, and why the successful-looking gentleman seemed so lost when it came to comforting the precious boy beside him. "Where are you watching from today?" Maria had always possessed an uncanny ability to read people, a skill honed through years of serving coffee to folks from all walks of life. The man in the corner booth was clearly successful. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than she made in 2 months, and the sleek silver watch catching the morning light spoke of wealth beyond her imagination. But success hadn't prepared him for the gentle soul sitting across from him, a beautiful boy with dark hair and the most expressive brown eyes she'd ever seen. The child, she guessed his name might be something classic, maybe Thomas or Daniel, was methodically arranging the sugar packets in perfect lines while humming a soft melody that only he could hear. Maria recognized the signs immediately. Her neighbor's grandson had similar traits, and she'd learned that routine and calm were everything for children like him. The businessman kept glancing at his buzzing phone, then back at the boy, his jaw tightening with each passing minute, as if he was fighting some internal battle between duty and devotion. "More coffee, gentlemen." Maria approached their table with her warmest smile, noting how the boy's humming stopped the moment she spoke. His father, for surely that's what he was given their matching stubborn chin, looked up with tired eyes that held a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "Please," he said quietly, his voice carrying just a hint of desperation. "And maybe, do you have anything plain? No sauce? No seasoning?" His question came with the weary tone of someone who'd learned that simple requests often met complicated responses in the outside world. "Of course, sweetheart," Maria said, directing her words to the boy who peeked up at her through his lashes. "How about some golden pancakes, plain as can be, with a little cup of maple syrup on the side? You can use as much or as little as you like." She kept her voice soft and steady, the same tone she'd used when her own daughter had been overwhelmed as a child. Something magical happened then. The boy's shoulders relaxed, and he offered the smallest nod, his fingers still organizing the sugar packets, but with less urgency now. The father, she caught a glimpse of his credit card and saw Mitchell embossed on the platinum surface. Mr. watched this exchange with something close to wonder. "He doesn't usually," Mitchell began, then stopped himself as if sharing too much might break whatever spell Maria had cast. But their peaceful moment shattered when Mitchell's phone rang with an aggressive buzzing that made the boy cover his ears again and rock more intensely. The name Harrison Holdings Urgent flashed on the screen, and Maria saw Mitchell's face transform from gentle father to high-powered executive in an instant. "I have to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "It's about the Petersonen deal, and if I don't—" He looked torn between the phone and his son, corporate responsibility wearing with paternal instinct. The boy's humming grew louder, a self-soothing mechanism that Maria recognized. But the breakfast crowd was getting busier and noisier. She watched Mitchell step outside for his call, pacing back and forth beyond the glass windows, one hand pressed to his ear, the other gesturing emphatically. Through the window, she could see him checking his watch, his free hand running through his hair in frustration. That's when the real trouble started. A group of construction workers at the next table began making comments about the boy's humming, their voices carrying that particular brand of ignorance that made Maria's protective instincts flare. "What's wrong with that kid?" one of them muttered loud enough for the boy to hear. "Can't he sit still like a normal person?" The boy's rocking intensified, and his careful arrangement of sugar packets scattered as his hands began to shake. Maria saw tears forming in those expressive brown eyes, and something fierce awakened in her chest. She'd spent 20 years protecting people in this diner, from heartbroken teenagers to elderly folks eating alone, and she wasn't about to let anyone hurt this precious child on her watch. Outside, Mitchell was deep in conversation, his back to the window, completely unaware that his son's carefully constructed sense of safety was crumbling with each cruel word from strangers who should have known better. The boy looked toward the door, searching for his father's reassuring presence, but found only empty space and the overwhelming noise of a world that didn't understand him. Maria made a decision that would change everything. Setting down her coffee pot with deliberate calm, she moved toward the construction workers' table, her protective mama bear instincts overriding any concern about customer service or keeping the peace. Sometimes she knew kindness required courage, and some battles were worth fighting, especially when innocent children were caught in the crossfire. The boy needed a champion, and Maria Santos had never backed down from protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. Maria didn't raise her voice. She'd learned long ago that quiet strength carried more power than shouting ever could. She approached the construction workers' table with the measured steps of a woman who'd spent decades navigating difficult situations with grace, her coffee pot still in hand, like a symbol of her authority in this small corner of the world. "Gentlemen," she said, her tone warm but unmistakably firm, "that young man over there is having a tough morning, and I'm sure you remember what it felt like to be overwhelmed when you were his age." She refilled their cups without being asked, a gesture of respect that somehow made her next words carry more weight. "Maybe we could keep our voices down and give him some space to find his calm." The lead worker, a burly man with paint-stained hands and a face that suggested he wasn't used to being corrected, looked up with surprise. "Lady, we're just trying to eat our breakfast. If the kid can't handle being in public, maybe, Maria interrupted gently. "We could all remember that this diner has been serving families for 40 years because we believe everyone deserves a place where they can feel safe and welcome." Her smile never wavered, but something in her eyes suggested this wasn't a request. That little boy is someone's everything, just like your children are yours. Behind her, she could hear the boy's breathing beginning to steady as the men's voices lowered to respectful murmurs. One of the younger workers, barely out of his teens, looked toward the corner booth with something like recognition dawning in his eyes. "My little brother's like that," he said quietly. "Gets overwhelmed in crowds." "Sorry, ma'am." But Maria's attention was drawn back to the boy when she heard a soft voice say, "Excuse me, miss." He was looking directly at her, his brown eyes still shimmery with unshed tears, but holding a spark of curiosity that hadn't been there before. In his small hands, he held the sugar packets he'd been arranging, now formed into a perfect star pattern. "This is beautiful, honey," Maria said, crouching, down to his eye level. "Did you make this for me?" He nodded solemnly. "It's like the one in my room. Daddy says stars help us find our way home when we're lost." His voice was soft but clear, each word carefully chosen and delivered, with the earnestness that only children possess. "Your daddy is very wise," Maria replied. accepting the sugar packet star as if it were made of pure gold. And you're very talented. What's your name, sweetheart? I'm Danny, he said, then added with obvious pride. Daniel Mitchell Harrison III, but I like Danny better because it's not so long. The name Harrison hit Maria like a gentle shock. Harrison Holdings. She'd seen that name in the business section of the newspaper, usually accompanied by words like billionaire and empire. She glanced out the window where Mr. Harrison, was still deep in what appeared to be an increasingly heated phone conversation, his free hand gesturing more frantically now. But her moment of realization was interrupted when Donnie's expression suddenly shifted from calm to distressed. A new customer had entered the diner, a sharply dressed woman with an iPad clutched to her chest in the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to getting her way immediately. Mr. Harrison, the woman called out, spotting Mitchell through the window. The board meeting moved up to 10, we need to leave now if we're going to make it across town. Danny's carefully maintained composure cracked. No, he said, his voice rising with panic. Daddy promised we'd finish breakfast. He promised we had all morning. The sugar packet scattered again as his hands began to tremble, and Maria could see him retreating into himself as the unexpected change shattered his sense of security. Mitchell rushed back inside, ending his call mid-sentence when he saw his son's distress. Danny, buddy, I know I promised, but sometimes you always say that, Danny whispered, and the heartbreak in those 4 words could have filled the entire diner. Everyone always has something more important. Maria watched the scene unfold, her heart breaking for both father and son. She could see the genuine anguish in Mitchell's eyes, the way he knelt beside Danny's chair despite his expensive suit, trying to explain corporate obligations to a boy who just wanted his daddy to keep a simple promise about pancakes, and uninterrupted and timed together the assistant with the iPad tapped her foot impatiently, checking her watch with the obvious irritation of someone whose carefully planned schedule was being disrupted by a child's needs. Mr. Harrison, the Peterson acquisition won't wait. This deal represents 18 months of negotiations. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. In that instant, Maria realized she was witnessing something that happened too often in the modern world. A father forced to choose between his son's emotional needs and the relentless demands of success. But sometimes she thought the choice shouldn't have to be made at all. Sometimes a little creative problem solving and a lot of heart could find a third option that nobody had considered. Danny was counting quietly to 10, a coping mechanism. His father had probably taught him, but his little shoulders were shaking with the effort of holding back tears. The battle between love and obligation was about to be decided, and Maria Santos refused to let this precious boy become another casualty of a world that moved too fast for gentle souls to keep up. The diner had grown quiet as if the entire morning. Crowds sensed the weight of the moment unfolding in the corner booth. Maria watched Mitchell's face cycle through emotions, love, frustration, duty, and heartbreak, all while his assistant tapped her expensive heel against the checkered linoleum floor with increasing impatience. Danny had gone very still, the kind of stillness that comes when a child realizes the adults in their world are about to make decisions that will hurt them, no matter how necessary those adults believe it to be. Daddy, Danny whispered, his small voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You said today was special. You said it was just for us. Mitchell closed his eyes briefly, and Maria could see the exact moment when his heart broke. She'd witnessed this scene too many times over the years, parents torn between providing for their children and being present with them, never realizing that sometimes presence was the most valuable gift of all. His phone buzzed again, the Petersonen deal demanding attention, while his son sat before him, needing nothing more than his father's promise to be kept. I know I did, buddy, and I meant it, Mitchell said, his voice thick with regret. But sometimes grown-up work is more important than me, Danny finished, his words barely audible, but heavy with the accumulated weight of too many broken promises. He began arranging the salt and pepper shakers in a perfect line, his small hands moving with mechanical precision, while his eyes filled with tears. He refused to let fall. The assistant stepped forward, her voice taking on the cold efficiency that Maria had come to associate with people who measured worth only in dollars and deadlines. Daniel, your father has responsibilities that affect thousands of employees. Surely you can understand that this meeting, his name is Danny, Maria said quietly, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. All eyes turned to her, but she kept her gaze fixed on the assistant. And he's 8 years old. 8-year-olds don't understand corporate acquisitions, but they understand when promises get broken. The assistant's eyebrows rose with the kind of condescension that made Maria's protective instincts flare even brighter. I'm sorry, but this is a family matter, and I don't think you're right, Maria interrupted, moving to stand beside Danny's chair. This is a family matter, which is why maybe the family should get to decide what's most important right now. She looked directly at Mitchell, seeing past the expensive suit to the exhausted father beneath. Mr. Harrison, I've been serving families in this diner for almost 20 years. I've seen a lot of children, and I've seen a lot of parents trying to do their best in an impossible world. But I've never seen a little boy who needed his daddy more than Danny needs you right now. Mitchell's phone rang again, the sound harsh and demanding in the quiet diner. This time he looked at it with something close to hatred before declining. The call. The board is expecting me, he said, but his words lacked conviction. If I don't show up, if this deal falls through, will it matter in 20 years? Maria asked gently. Will Danny remember the Peterson acquisition when he's grown up? Or will he remember the morning his father chose him over everything else in the world? Danny had stopped arranging the condiments and was watching his father with the kind of hope that only children can summon in the face of repeated disappointment. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. This absolute faith that maybe this once love would win over obligation. The assistant's voice grew sharp with frustration. With all due respect, Mrs. Santos, Maria Santos, Mrs. Santos, you don't understand the complexities of running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. This isn't just about one meeting. This is about what really matters, Mitchell said suddenly, his voice stronger than it had been all morning. He was looking at Danny now, really looking at him as if seeing his son clearly for the first time in months. You're right, Patricia. I don't think you do understand. He turned off his phone completely, the decisive click echoing in the quiet diner like a small revolution. Call Harrison and tell them I'll review the Petersonen materials tonight and we'll meet first thing tomorrow morning. If they can't wait 24 hours for 18 months of work, then maybe they're not the right partners for us anyway. Patricia's mouth opened in shock. Mitchell, you can't be serious. The board will understand that sometimes being a good father has to come before being a good CEO, he said firmly. And if they don't, then maybe I'm working for the wrong people. Danny's face transformed with wonder and disbelief, as if he'd just witnessed a miracle in the middle of Maple Grove Diner. You mean it, Daddy? We can really have our whole morning together. I mean it, Mitchell said, reaching over to ruffle his son's hair. We can have pancakes and talk about stars and anything else you want. The whole world can wait. Maria felt tears prick her own eyes as she watched father and son smile at each other with pure joy. But her moment of happiness was interrupted when she heard Patricia make a phone call that would change everything. Mr. Harrison, Patricia said into her phone, her voice cold with anger. I think you should know that your son just cost the company millions of dollars because he couldn't handle eating breakfast in public like a normal child. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. The words hung in the air like poison, and Maria saw Donnie's face crumble as he heard himself described as a burden, a problem to be managed rather than a precious child to be loved. Sometimes she realized the cruelest. Battles were fought with words, and this particular war was far from over. The silence that followed Patricia's cruel phone call was deafening. Donnie's small face went through a series of emotions, confusion, hurt, and finally a terrible understanding that he was somehow to blame for his father's professional troubles. He began to rock again, harder this time, his hands covering his ears as if he could block out not just the assistant's words, but the entire weight of being seen as a burden. Patricia, you're fired, Mitchell said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made everyone in the diner turn to look. Clear out your desk today. Security will escort you out. You can't be serious, Patricia sputtered, her professional composure finally cracking. Over a tantrum in a diner. Over my son, Mitchell corrected, his voice growing stronger with each word. Over the fact that you just called an 8-year-old boy abnormal because he experiences the world differently than you do. Over 24 months of watching you treat the most important person in my life like he's an inconvenience to be managed. But the damage was already done. Danny had heard himself called a problem, a burden, the reason his father was losing money and disappointing important people. Maria could see him retreating into himself, building walls that might take years to tear down. "Danny," Maria said softly, kneeling beside his chair. "Can you look at me, sweetheart?" He peeked at her through his fingers, his brown eyes swimming with unshed tears. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "I see a boy who notices everything. How the sugar packets can make beautiful patterns. How his daddy's voice changes when he's worried. How the morning light makes the flowers on the tables look like tiny suns. I see someone who feels things deeply and loves purely. And that's not a problem, honey. That's a gift." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a worn leather journal, the kind she used to jot down orders and phone numbers. "This morning, before you and your daddy came in, I was feeling sad because my daughter is away at college, and I was missing her something fierce. But then you made me that beautiful star out of sugar packets. And suddenly I remembered that there's magic all around us if we just know how to look for it." Danny's rocking slowed as he listened, his hands dropping from his ears. "Your daddy didn't lose anything important today," Maria continued, glancing up at Mitchell, who was watching with tears in his own eyes. "He found something precious. He remembered that being your father is the most important job he'll ever have." Mitchell sat down heavily in the booth beside his son, pulling Danny close. "She's right, buddy. I've been so busy trying to build a company for your future that I almost forgot to be here for your present. And you know what? Every dollar I might lose, every deal that might fall through, none of it matters more than this moment with you." "But what if people think I'm weird?" Danny whispered, voicing the fear that had been growing in his heart. "Then those people are missing out on knowing one of the most special boys in the whole world," Mitchell said firmly. "And their opinion doesn't get to decide your worth." Maria stood up, her heart full, as she watched father and son hold each other. But she wasn't finished yet. She walked over to where Patricia stood, still clutching her phone and iPad like shields against a world that had suddenly stopped making sense. "Ma'am," Maria said quietly, "I need to ask you to leave. This is a family diner, and family means treating everyone with kindness and respect, especially children." Patricia's face flushed red with indignation. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who he is?" She gestured toward Mitchell. "This is Mitchell Harrison, CEO of Harrison Holdings. I could buy this entire place and tear it down tomorrow." "Maybe you could," Maria agreed calmly, "but you can't buy back the damage you just tried to do to that little boy's heart. And you can't tear down the love in this family, no matter how hard you try." Several other customers began to applaud, a quiet show of support that grew louder as more people joined in. The construction workers from earlier stood up, and the young man who'd mentioned his brother stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Patricia, "my little brother is like Danny, and I'd want someone like Mrs. Santos looking out for him if I wasn't in there. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales." Patricia looked around the diner, seeing nothing but faces united in protection of one special little boy, and finally understood that she had lost more than just her job. That morning, she had lost the chance to be part of something beautiful, something that money couldn't buy and power couldn't control. As she gathered her things and left without another word, Maria returned to Mitchell and Donnie's table with a plate of perfect golden pancakes, plain as promised, with maple syrup on the side. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. 3 months later, Maria was wiping down that same corner booth when she heard the familiar jingle of the diner's bell. She looked up to see Mitchell and Danny walking through the door, both of them wearing matching grins that spoke of shared adventures and inside jokes. Danny immediately ran to her, his face bright with excitement. "Miss Maria, look what I brought you." He held out a carefully crafted star made from folded paper, painted gold and silver with tiny glitter that caught the afternoon light. "Daddy and I made it together. He learned how to do origami just so we could make you something special." Mitchell approached more slowly, his expensive suits replaced by comfortable jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The perpetual tension that had lined his face during their first meeting was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like peace. Danny insisted we stop by during our Saturday adventure, he explained, but his smile suggested he'd been just as eager to return. We go on adventures every Saturday now, Danny announced proudly, climbing into his favorite booth. Last week we went to the butterfly garden, and Daddy learned that butterflies taste with their feet. Did you know that, Miss Maria? I did not know that, Maria laughed, accepting the paper star like the treasure it was. That's amazing. What else have you two discovered? As Danny launched into an enthusiastic account of their recent explorations, and to the science museum where they'd built rockets, the park where they'd fed ducks and learned their names, the library where Danny had found 3 new books about constellations. Maria noticed the profound change in both father and son. They finished each other's sentences now, shared private jokes, and moved with the comfortable rhythm of 2 people who had learned to truly see each other. The Peterson deal? Maria asked quietly while Danny was distracted by the jukeboxing. The corner fell through completely, Mitchell admitted with a shrug. Turned out they were looking for a company they could control, not a partner they could respect. Best thing that ever happened to us, actually. I restructured the entire business model. Now I work from home 3 days a week and Saturdays are sacred. No meetings, no calls, no exceptions. And the company, Mitchell's grin widened, more profitable than ever. Turns out when your employees see you prioritizing family, they start doing the same thing. Productivity is up, turnover is down, and we're attracting the kind of partners who understand that good business starts with good people. Danny bounded back to the table, his eyes shining with an idea. Miss Maria, Daddy says you have a daughter in college. Does she like stars too? She does, Maria said, thinking of her. Rebecca's studying astronomy 3 states away. She's learning about them in school. We should all look at the same stars sometime, Danny suggested with the pure logic of childhood. That way we're all connected, even when we're far apart. You know what, buddy? Mitchell said, ruffling his son's hair. I think that's the smartest thing anyone said all week. As they prepared to leave after sharing pancakes and stories, Danny suddenly grew serious. Miss Maria, do you remember when that mean lady said I wasn't normal? Maria's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. I remember, sweetheart. Well, I decided she was right, Danny said, then broke into a grin before Maria could respond. I'm not normal, I'm extraordinary. That's what Daddy says. That normal is boring, and extraordinary is what makes the world interesting. Mitchell's eyes filled with tears as he listened to his son speak with such confidence and joy. He started a club at school, he explained, for kids who think differently. They call themselves the Extraordinary Club, and they're teaching other children that different doesn't mean wrong. It just means special. And guess what? Danny added excitedly. 3 more kids joined this week. We're going to change the whole world, one extraordinary person at a time. As they walked toward the door, Danny turned back one more time. Miss Maria, thank you for protecting me that day. Daddy says that's what angels do. They show up when people need them most, disguised as regular people doing their jobs. After they left, Maria stood in the quiet diner, holding Donnie's paper star, thinking about the ripple effects of kindness. One moment of choosing to stand up for a child had changed not just their morning, but their entire lives. Mitchell had restructured his priorities. Danny had found his confidence, and she had been reminded that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to let cruelty win. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across the checkered floor, and Maria smiled as she placed Danny's star in the window where everyone could see it shine. Because that's what extraordinary people do. They make sure the light keeps shining no matter how dark the world might seem. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovering that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is simply choosing kindness when it matters most.